Okay, so in this video, let's go ahead and compare the all-new iPad 10 to the iPad Air 5. Let's jump in. Another voiceover video simply because my audio let me down when that bulk recorded. Let's hop right in. If you're currently in the market, you're trying to decide between the iPad Air 5 and the iPad 10, the answer is not gonna come out of either one of those tablets. Do not choose either one of those. Go for the iPad 4. Yes, I said it. But anyway, so let's talk about the iPad 10 and the iPad Air 5 here. They are essentially the same tablet, same build, same display, 10.9 inches liquid retina, same resolution, I believe 2360 by 1640 or so pixel, 264 ppi, that's essentially what it is. Now, I'm not gonna dive too deep into the specs here. It's gonna be redundant to kind of repeat a lot of these specs, right? So they do have, obviously some differences, but in terms of the physical attributes of the tablet, they are essentially the same, Touch ID, USB Type-C, 4 grills there for speaker, although the speakers on the iPad Air 5 do seem to be slightly better. It could be me, but they seem to be slightly better. Now, another difference that you have on the iPad 10 is that you have the front-facing camera there placed on the long part of the iPad. That's where it's supposed to be. You don't have that on the other tablets in the family, the iPad family, but that is one main difference there, because on the iPad Air or the iPad Air 5 or the 4, you have it on the short side of the tablet, which is the wrong side. But anyway, they both do not support 120 hertz, so that means they are stuck at 60 hertz, and they also can go as high up to 500 nits in terms of brightness. All right, that's it. I'm gonna stop there with the specs. So they are essentially the same tablet physically. Sure, with the iPad 10 here, you get, newer colors, brighter colors, not available on the iPad Air. Now, going back to the camera there, they both support, center stage, right? So you have a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. Like I said, you have it on the right side on the iPad 10 and you have it on the wrong side on the iPad Air 5. But either way, the specs are the same. They do offer, center stage where when you can move around, you have people joining the call and the camera will automatically, adjust depending on what's happening, on the setting, and make sure that everyone is within frame. Now on the back, obviously you don't have center stage on the back. They both have 12 megapixel cameras on the back there, and these are not meant for you to be taking, high resolution pictures, but the camera quality or the picture quality coming out of these is not bad at all when compared to, previous generation or, the iPad 9, for example, or the iPad 8. Now, one major difference I want to hop right into is the use of the Apple stylus. So the iPad 10 here does support the Apple Pencil first generation as opposed to the iPad Air 5 here that supports the Apple Pencil second generation. That is a major change. Plus, on the iPad Air 5 here, you have an M1 chip and 8 gigs of RAM as opposed to the iPad 10 here where you have an A14 Bionic chip along with 4 gigs of RAM. That is a major difference in terms of just, performance. Sure, the M1 chip on the iPad Air could be adjusted or capped, but it still performs way better than what you have on the iPad 10 here. And by me saying it performs way better, it doesn't mean that, obviously day-to-day tasks, you'll be able to tell. You can only tell when you are embarking in some type of heavy productivity task, right? When it comes out to gaming, you won't even be able to notice anything there either. So gaming, watching movies, entertainment, all of that good stuff is good on either one of these two. And finally, one last thing with the iPad 10 here is that it has a non-laminated display as opposed to the iPad Air 5 where you have a laminated display. So a better user experience, right? So watching movies and things like that, even using that Apple Pencil, you get a better user experience on the laminated display like what you have on the iPad Air 5 as opposed to what you have on the iPad 10. And the last thing on display here is that the iPad Air 5 does have an anti-reflective coating, meaning you should be able to, if you're on campus, if you're a student, you're on campus and you are using your iPad when it's sunny, you should be a bit more comfortable using your iPad Air 5 than you would if you had the iPad 10 because it does not have an anti-reflective coating. Now, I want to say that things do seem to pop a bit more on the iPad Air in terms of colors, just the way they look. They're not as inky black as what you would get on like on OLED display or anything like that, but it does seem like things are popping a bit more on the iPad Air 5 as opposed to the iPad 10 here. Now, I think that's enough back and forth between these two tablets. Let's go ahead and just close the conversation, right? So if you are currently in the market for either one of these two, you gotta think about the future, right? So if you're looking at the iPad Air 5, right? 8 gigs of RAM, M1 chip, right? That's a little bit more future-proof because as files continue to get larger, right? And, these games are getting larger. That's something that you may want to be keeping in mind when you have a lot of things running in the background, right? As opposed to 4 gigs of RAM that you would have with the iPad 10. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Even with all of that said, if you are in the market for either one of these two tablets, get yourself the iPad 4th generation with 256 gigs. I've actually seen that at Walmart go as low as $480 for 256 gigs of internal storage. Plus, you get the same 4 gigs of RAM, right? Same 4 gigs of RAM as the iPad 10, and you also get that A14 Bionic chip. On top of that, you will get a tablet that does support 2nd generation Apple Pencil and a bunch of other things that are just better on the iPad Air than they are on the iPad 10. Now, I'm not saying the iPad 10 is just, has no purpose. Obviously, there is a purpose for it, but the way I see it, in order for you to be a bit more practical, maybe you should consider the iPad 4. Because again, you have to keep in mind that Apple does support their tablets for a long time. So the iPad Air 4 will be relevant for a good while, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Now, obviously, if you don't want the iPad Air 4, by all means, go ahead and pick between these two. Either one would be, would do just fine. What I'm saying is that if you have something that you need to do and you feel like the iPad Air 4 will not be able to do that for you, then maybe you need to just go ahead and buy the iPad Pro, right? And just skip the 10 and the Air 5 if you feel like the Air 4 may not be able to handle what you're trying to do. Let me know what you think of this idea in the comment section. Let's go ahead and link up in the comment section. We'll catch you in our comment section. Make sure to share the video, subscribe. If you haven't done so, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Catch you in the comment section. I'm also going to catch you in the next video. Up until that next video, of course, as always, stay safe out there.